My message this morning will be coming from verses 11 to 12, 11 through 12 in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Hear now God's holy and inerrant and infallible word, the believer's only rule for faith and practice. Our teacher writes, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. But time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no man knows when his hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. May God bless the reading of His holy word. Let us pray. Open now to Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Chapter 9. My message this morning will be coming from verses 11 to 12, 11 through 12 in Ecclesiastes chapter 9. Hear now God's holy and inerrant and infallible word, the believer's only rule for faith and practice. Our teacher writes, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not to the swift, or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise, or wealth to the brilliant, or favor to the learned. But time and chance happen to them all. Moreover, no man knows when his hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net, or birds are taken in a snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly upon them. May God bless the reading of His holy word. Let us pray. Our gracious and loving God, Father, we are so thankful that your word addresses every circumstance that comes into our life. Even surprises are not a surprise to you. Circumstances under which we are right now just give us a reflection, a perspective on the fact that we're not in control. We thank you that you are. And Father, we pray that as we look at this passage of Scripture this morning, that you may find ways to impress it upon our hearts, not only the variety and the profundity of circumstance, but the fact, Lord, that through all circumstances, in every way, we can depend upon you, our Creator, our Maker, our God, our King, and our Savior. In Jesus' name, amen. Please be seated. It's hard to even sit down some days. Isn't that something? He's getting his knee all rehabilitated, and it rains. And everything stiffens up. Brothers and sisters, I love the book of Ecclesiastes. Some people kind of avoid it. They say, I am so confused. When I turn to this book, I just avoid it altogether. But not me, I love it. Matter of fact, during our time in the Cayman Islands, I preached from Ecclesiastes probably 20 times or more. Because at every time, every message, every funeral, I preached from Ecclesiastes. Because it offered some hope and comfort to the family of the bereaved, and also pointed to the necessity of faith in a holy, righteous, living, and loving God. And so this morning we're going to spend time in Ecclesiastes because I think it's going to touch our circumstances, both those who are here and those who have to listen to us over the internet. All right? Now, Ecclesiastes was written by the wisest man who ever lived. Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived. Solomon reigned from 970 to 930 BC. He, as you know, was the second offspring of David and Bathsheba. Second son of David and Bathsheba. And you would think, how can God bring something good out of something that bad? Of the circumstances of David and Bathsheba, but he did. And not only that, he gave us, in Solomon, the wisest and most powerful and most God-glorifying king the world had ever known. People would come from all over the world to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Turn with me to 1 Kings chapter 4. 1 Kings chapter 4. First Kings chapter 4, I'm going to begin reading in verse 29. Notice what the scripture says concerning Solomon. God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight, and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the men of the East, and greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than any other man, including Ethan the Ezrahite. How would you like to be known as the second smartest man? He's forever memorialized as being not quite Solomon. Ethan the Ezrahite. Wiser than Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol. His fame spread to all the surrounding nations. He spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He described plant life from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He also taught about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. Men of all nations came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. Isn't that remarkable? See, back in Deuteronomy, God promised in Moses spoke the words that the time would come that all nations would remark about how wise the people of God are, because they have such a wise and wonderful God, and that they would be remarked upon as proverbially as the wisdom of the living God. And that came to its fullest fruition during the reign of Solomon, where the known world came and worshipped God for the wisdom of Solomon. It was quite impressive. You probably remember reading about how the Queen of Sheba came. Remember, Queen of Sheba came she had heard of all the fame and the riches and the glory of Solomon, and came and said, my breath is taken away. I couldn't even have imagined. My imaginings were not big enough for all that Solomon has and has done. And she was so impressed. And in another sermon, I'll tell you what the outcome of that story was. But let us suffice it to say right now that Solomon was the wisest man on earth. And we like to spend time in Proverbs. People love the Proverbs. Solomon's wise sayings out of Proverbs are very often read and remarked and quoted. Less so are the teachings of Ecclesiastes. And I think that's because many people miss the overall theme of Ecclesiastes. I want you to look at our passage there in chapter 9, because where we are beginning seems to be the follow-up to something else he has remarked on. Notice it says, I have seen something else under the sun. We say, well, gee, we're jumping in right in the middle. Why are we jumping in the middle? What is that? What is the previous that he has seen under the sun that was so remarkable? It's summarized in the paragraph previous, and I'm going to summarize the summary of it this way. The summary of the summary is this. Solomon's teaching up until this point has been, while you live on earth, live life to the fullest, Give God the glory for it all and worship Him as a priority in all that you do. For example, turn with me back to, let's go to chapter 2, verse 24. Notice that he says, a man can do nothing better than to eat and drink and find satisfaction in his work. This too, I see, is from the hand of God. I think a lot of people miss out on that. I think even today, I'm not just talking about Bible people, I'm talking about people in general miss out on the fact that all that we have that is good has come to us from the hand of God, and we ought to give thanks to Him and praise His name. Look at the end of chapter 3, verse 25. I say 25 and 22. So I saw that there is nothing better for a man than to enjoy his work, because that is his lot. For who can bring him to see what will happen after him? A concentration on be aware of your circumstances and enjoy them. And we find ourselves in circumstances now that are pretty hard to enjoy, don't we? It's pretty tough to enjoy the circumstances. Well, maybe our vision is a little too low. We need to broaden our vision. We need to raise our vision and understand that all that God has given to us comes to us as a gift from His grace. Look at chapter 5, verse 18. Then I realized that it is good and proper for a man to eat and drink and to find satisfaction in his toilsome labor under the sun, during the few days of life God has given to him. For this is his lot. Verse 19, moreover, when God gives any man wealth and possessions and enables him to enjoy them, to accept his lot and be happy in his work, this is a gift of God. You know, weekends became popular in the 20th century. But I think it might be because people were so mismatched to their Monday through Friday employment that weekends took on added significance because they could do what they wanted to do. The joy of life is being able to do what you want to do every day of your life and love it and give God the glory. We had a member down in Florida who was in his 80s. But you know what he loved to do? Farm peanuts. And he loved it so much he had a peanut processing plant and a pecan processing plant so that he could work even when the peanuts were picked. So he could work after the pecans had already fallen. I mean, he loved it so much. He was just, and his wife said he's never going to retire. He was in his 80s, still is. And he's still working, and he loves it. What a blessing of God to be able to do what you love to do. And those who find that have a great opportunity. So let's turn to chapter 8, verse 15. Chapter 8, verse 15, he says, so I commend the enjoyment of life, because nothing is better for a man under the sun than to eat and drink and be glad. The joy will accompany him in his work all the days of the life God has given to him under the sun. Praise and worship of God is never missing from Solomon. Now remember the other parts of the early chapters of Solomon. He talks about how he chased after wisdom, he chased after riches, and he chased after wine, and he tried it all. And it never satisfied him, never satisfied. There was nothing that he could do that satisfied him. And so at every turn he comes back to God. Because in God alone could he find meaning and purpose and satisfaction in life. And so when we come to a situation like we are in today, when It seems as though we are out of control, that we do not control our circumstances. It's brought home to us more now than it ever was beforehand. You know, we like to pretend we're in control. We like to pretend we run things, don't we? As a matter of fact, we arrange our lives in such a way that the few things we can control, those are the things we spend our time on. And then comes a quarantine, such as we have, and all of a sudden you realize, hey, I can't even control that. I can't control my own life because someone on the outside or something from the outside has interfered with me. That's when you realize there's got to be something bigger than just me and the few toys I can arrange on my table. And so Solomon comes to the second great revelation from his book. When he says in verse 11, I have seen something else under the sun. Now I want you to notice this. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong. Nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned. You know, we hear all that all the time and say, man, all you got to do is work hard. If you work hard long enough, what great success you'll be. Race, the race, run that race, and if you're swift, you'll win. And then you read these verses, the race is not to the swift. The reason the race is not to the swift has nothing to do with how hard you race. The reason the battle is not to the strong has nothing to do with how strong you are. There's something outside, there's an outside something at work. You can't see it. You can't plan for it. You can't even know it. You know, we had a defense secretary under President Bush who talked about planning for the unknown. He says when you're getting ready to plan for the unknown, you've got to realize that there are two types of unknowns. There's the known unknowns and the unknown unknowns. And somehow you've got to plan for them both. Well, that's pretty tough, isn't it? Guess what? The unknown unknowns are unknown. Great revelation. You write that down. Because sometimes something you could not have planned for is going to change the playing field. Speaking of playing fields, how many of y'all remember the extra second that was put on the clock at the Alabama Auburn game? So that we could try to kick a field goal. Remember that? How did that end up? Oh, I tell you what, sometimes all your planning gets turned topsy-turvy. All the things, all the wisdom of man, even the wisdom of Nick Saban, could not account for the ending of that game. The race is not to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned. You think, well, we've got smart people. We have smart people that are telling us how to run our lives. You know, when you remove the running of people's lives to some remote location and put it in the hands of people you don't know, you're really surrendering. I guess there's no other word. Or you're surrendering your sovereignty over your own life to someone whose motives you don't know, someone whose desires may be in conflict with the actions that he suggests, or at least your desires are in conflict with his actions. And how do you deal with that? How do you do that? How can you rationalize surrendering control to an unknown clique of people that you don't, they don't know you and they don't care? We have a whole portion of our government that doesn't care about you. They're sitting at home in their mansions. They're not even going to work. They don't care. They don't care. They have ulterior motives. They say, well, this whole viral thing, this is an opportunity for us to make government bigger. Well, what about people? Wealth does not come to the brilliant or favor to the learned. Notice chance happen to them all. You see, we think of life on earth as the way it seems to be, and we think that that's all there is. Life is the way it seems to be, because we can only see this dimension. We can only see in the physical realm. We can't see outside the physical realm. But we see inside the physical realm, and we see the way things are supposed to be in a perfect world. Well, we're not in a perfect world, but we like to imagine that in a perfect world, things turn out right. Peg and I have been watching a series on Netflix called The Innocence Project. Have any of y'all heard of that? The Innocence Project. It tells the story of people, poor people, who were wrongly convicted of heinous crimes based upon junk science, and how they have been sought out by the Innocence Project, and opportunities to overturn their cases through things like DNA. And yesterday's episode concerned a man who had been locked up for 33 years for a crime he hadn't committed. Now, we don't like to think that life works that way, but it does. And for him to spend 33 years in jail, you think, well, boy, he must have been really angry when he came out. He must have been mad at the world. He was the sweetest old man you could ever see. He had spent the majority of his life in prison. And yet he had a sweet spirit about him. And he said, you know, my goal in life now is to try to get governments, legislatures to pass bills rejecting junk science as evidence in cases so that this doesn't happen to anybody else. And he wasn't bitter. Because we like to think that life as it seems to be is the right way that it's supposed to turn out. But just about the time you're counting on life as it seems to be, that's when the curve is thrown. That's when you get to the line. But time and chance happen to them all. Now, we as Presbyterians, we're not big on chance. You know, we're not. But how do you describe the profundity of circumstances with a word that's better than chance? It just seems to be. It just seems to be a fitting word. Time and chance. You know the passage of time. You know the hardest thing to maintain throughout our whole lifetime is your reputation, your character. You know that? You know? Reputation is what other people think of you. Character is what you are from the inside out. You can fool people a lot by having a bad character but a good reputation doesn't always last. Some people get found out. Some people, you know, first of all, they might not get found out in this life, many do, but they're not fooling God. They're not. So our character is of foundational importance. There's nothing better than a good name. That's a proverb. There's nothing better than a good name. So we work hard, we as people, to maintain our good name. Time and chance enters into the normalcy of life, the predictable parts of life. Time and chance come in, and all of a sudden we're thrown for a loop. Look at our situation with the COVID virus. We didn't see it coming. We didn't see it coming. We didn't plan for it. We couldn't have planned for it. We didn't know it. But the reaction to it has been swift and draconian, and perhaps it has done its job in mitigating the virus so that we're safe. But we didn't see it coming. And for many, some perhaps even among our membership, it has caused the ruination of their life. It has wrecked their finances. It has destroyed their livelihood. It has wreaked havoc. Well, how do you deal with that? Well, time and circumstance happen to us all. But there's something beyond just time and circumstance. There's someone beyond time and circumstance. And He is the one who sustains us. He is the one who is not surprised when these types of things happen. He is not in any way perplexed. He's working out His plan. Perhaps you've read stories on the internet, like I have, of whole groups of people turning to the Lord through this circumstance who never would have considered faith in God as a necessary thing. You know, the type of people who never have to pray, give us this day our daily bread, because they thought, I've got so much, I'll never be out of bread. I'll never be short of bread. And now their ability to earn bread has been wrecked. And people are coming to faith. You know, there's a great hope in many of us Christian ministers. There's a great hope that out of this turmoil, out of this strife, will come a new revival. Wouldn't that be something? Wouldn't it be a revival in true biblical Christianity and faith and trust in God? Wouldn't that be great? But if God accomplishes that, and I pray that He does, well, here's another thing that we could never have imagined. That He would use something like a Chinese virus to turn us around and get our eyes focused on Him. Now, Solomon's been warning us and exhorting us in every chapter. Get God in your life. Put Him first and you'll enjoy everything else. So, that's a great piece of wisdom right there. Notice in verse 12. Moreover, no man knows when his hour will come. You know, man isn't in control of himself. We'd like to think we're in control. No? We'd like that. Everything's going normally, and I'm going to live a normal life. I saw a video the other day, showed up on the internet, of a fellow and his wife walking down the street in some town. They were just merely walking down the street. When a block away, a truck lost its tire. And the tire comes bounding across the highway and hits him right in the back of the head and drops him dead, just like that. What did he do? What did he do to earn that? Nothing. So Jesus cautioned about thinking that bad things happen to bad people and good things never happen. Bad things never happen to good people. And he warned against that. Who do you think was at fault when the Tower of Siloam fell down and killed 12 people? You know? You just don't know. You are not in control of your life. Man is not in control of his life or his destiny. No man knows when his hour will come. As fish are caught in a cruel net or birds are taken in a snare, so men are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly on them. Sometimes it feels that way, doesn't it? Reflect upon it. Sometimes it just feels like we are trapped by evil times that fall unexpectedly. And the question then is, where would we be if we have not faith in God? Where would we be? Where will we be when the unexpected in life falls upon us? You think about that? Can you afford not to think about that? Fish are caught in a cruel net. Get the imagery. Some of us are fish farmers. We know all about cruel nets. What's cruel to the fish is money in the back. But you know, the fish probably have a different perspective. Birds words taken in a sneer. Men are trapped by evil times. That's what we are. We are trapped by evil times. The Bible doesn't skirt around the topic of evil. The Bible accurately and adequately addresses the problem of evil. We know why evil is in the world is because of the fall. We know that there was a time in history past when the first man and the first woman took their eyes off the Lord and began to judge right and wrong for themselves and made the blunder that has plunged our world into sin. So many of the things that happen in our life, the circumstances that happen through history, are a result of the fall. The Wuhan virus is a result of the fall, as it is anything else. James warned his people in the letter that he wrote. He said, all right, you who say today or tomorrow I'm going to go to this town and engage in business and make a profit. And he really gets on them and says, who are you and what makes you think that's going to happen? You see, we like to plan and we like to assume things are going to turn out our way. But the fact is, it all depends on the Lord. What you should say these days is, if the Lord wills, I will do thus and so. God is in control. God is in control in our current situation, our current circumstance. We may feel like we're trapped. We may feel like we're out of control. But we are the people who understand that we don't have control, but we know the one who does. We know him. He's our King. He's our Lord. He's our Savior. And we can trust him through the unknowns of life, the circumstances of life. We must trust the Lord and not ourselves. Christians, of all people on earth, are the ones who are going to come through this situation. If they learn the lessons of Ecclesiastes, they will come through our current situation just fine in the overall context, in the sense that they will remain faithful to the Lord, who alone is in control of life. I encourage you all to recommit yourself to obedience to the Lord, following the Lord in faith, trusting him for the things that you don't understand, knowing that we serve an almighty, all-wise, all-knowing, all-loving God. If we trust in him, our faith will be strengthened and revived, and the faith of others will be strengthened and revived. And maybe, just maybe, God willing, that revival will come to Eutaw and Bolaji and Greentown. The revival will come. People will come to know and trust in Jesus Christ, their only Savior. Let us pray. Dear Father in heaven, thank you, Lord, that you're in control. Thank you, Lord, that you know all of our circumstances. You're not in the least confused or perplexed. What seems as circumstance to us is just merely a part of the plan of God. When things don't turn out the way we think they should, we know they turn out exactly the way you think they should. And that gives us hope. It gives us strength. Lord, we're able to go on because you are in control. Thank you, Father, for a risen Savior. Thank you that the Lord Jesus Christ, by his death and resurrection, has rescued us from the grip of death, given us new life, forgiveness of sins, a place in the family of God, and a home forever in heaven. Father, may we live like it. May we promote it to everyone we know. And may you be glorified